climate change is real, it's happening, sorry, climate change, and certainly with policy. Let's see. Just down here, there we go. But what I see is, if everything's gonna change, where do we want it to change to? How can we take this as an opportunity? How can we leverage the changes that we're going to need to make to change? You know, we also are seeing just radical changes in the technology that we use on a daily basis. We're seeing enormous changes in construction techniques. So there's a lot that we can kind of leverage to our advantage. What we want to do is start thinking about it now. We have spending that we're doing on a daily basis as cities, as counties, as states, and as individual homeowners. So how do we use the investments that we're making already more wisely to set ourselves on a solid path for the future? So I'm going to run through just a couple of quick examples of sort of things that are going on in different places. You know, one of the things that we're certainly going to want to do in the face of more intense rainfalls, for example, but also longer and drier and hotter drought periods, is we want to leave space for water. We want when water comes down, to have space to let it flow, retain it, capture it, and allow it to infiltrate. We already, in Las Cruces, have an urban heat island effect. It's several degrees warmer in the city than it is in the surrounding areas. So we want to find ways to mitigate that. If it's getting warmer already, we don't need to be making it worse. We want to be thinking about the policies, the zoning requirements we have, and how can we, with policy changes, support people in making more sensible decisions. And this is one that is perhaps together, and by combining resources, we'll all have a much better opportunity moving forward to kind of affect the change we want to see. So I have just a few short slides sort of examples of things that are going on. They aren't all desert Southwest, but Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is an example of a small community park. It provides green space. It serves an underserved area. It also is collecting and capturing stormwater and providing stormwater management. And what I love is that it provides a space for people to congregate. So it's multi-use, and it's sort of pulling and addressing different aspects all at once. City of Flint, they've newly updated their master plan. They're facing enormous issues so that they can sort of address pollution, manage flooding, manage stormwater. So this is sort of more on the policy end of what can you do if you put the policies in place. The Rio Grande Water Fund, which many of you are probably already familiar with. This is really exciting because it's a private forest. It's a huge goal. It's a 10 to 30 year program, and they want to mitigate entire watershed scale forest ecosystems. But the potential payoff here is, a tenfold savings versus allowing those spaces to burn, and they create local jobs, in a way that the forest fires will not. And so, all of these efforts are already making a difference, and we just need to scale them up. And then my fourth and final example is Seattle. Their Department of Neighborhoods is working on reinvigorating areas across the city with the goal of really creating community and social fabric, so that they're creating public spaces to draw people out, to connect people. Because in a disaster, it's those human connections that really make a difference. And so that piece of building community, a huge part of what climate change means for us is moving into the unknown. You know, we've given you examples, personal connections, but that's also connections at work. That's connections across departments. That's between public and private. It's between nonprofits and for-profit organizations. Because that's going to allow us the flexibility when the unexpected happens to respond appropriately. And I think New Mexico is really good at this. You know, there's a deep, there are sort of deep roots in this state. There's particularly deep roots around water and shortage sharing and working together as communities, and I think to just broaden that out. So, so what next? We're going to have societal change, so let's leverage that to make the world what we want it to be. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We hope that we didn't depress you too much. There's endless possibilities, and we were discussing them throughout the day today, so I'm excited for the opportunities that are in front of us. This is a great opportunity for you, to anyone that would like to ask the panel a question. This is your chance.
Thank you. Could you quantify the worst case emissions versus the low emission figure? What does that represent, those two things, in terms of modern day emissions and the future of the world?
That's a great question, and I don't know the precise answer to that. But so the low emission scenario is going to result in 4.5 more watts of energy storage, is that right? They're named 4.5 and 8 watts per meter squared, so increased heat globally per meter, right? Yes. And then the higher emission scenario is 8.5 watts per meter squared increase in energy.
Well, I was thinking more in terms of, is the higher emissions essentially business as usual with the developing countries adopting our high energy, high emissions lifestyle?
Yeah, so the way they, well, okay, so I'll go back to the previous National Climate Assessment results. So yes, effectively, the higher emissions scenario, you could think of it as a world where population continues to increase, where there's not much technology adoption to reduce those emissions, and also where the economies of the world are fragmented and not working together. Whereas the lower emission scenario is more technology adoption, population increase plateaus and starts to decrease towards the latter half of the century, and there's more economic cooperation.
Thank you.
What's a haboob?
Okay. Haboob is an Arabic word for the dust storms that we see. That basically it's a wall of dust. And those are created during the convective storms. Those are like the thunderstorms we see. And as they die, they evaporate the water vapor in them, and that water vapor energy is turned into wind. And it comes straight down, and then hits the ground, and it goes horizontally. As it goes horizontally, it's like a wall of high winds. And if it hits an area that's erodible, it'll all of a sudden make dust. And you'll see this wall of dust. And you probably have seen them on TV, like in Phoenix. They're very popular on the TV, on that. So that, but we do get those here, but very in Mexico than we do here. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. I've got a question for the two ladies on the right. In terms of quantifiable impacts for Las Cruces, what are we looking at? Is there going to be like limits on population growth, economic development? Are we going to have to kind of shift from farming and agriculture to more that population focus? Is it going to be piping water in from somewhere else? What are the kind of, what's on the horizon in that respect?
I think the reason, I think the reason we're having the discussions we've had today and the Doña Ana County is that future is of course in the hands of the people. It's in the hands of the people and of their elected leaders. So certainly as we get further and further down the road of planetary warming, our options decrease. But certainly there are plenty of options today for ways that we manage locally, ways that we manage our country, ways that we manage the world, and the degrees of cooperation, the kinds of things that Dr. Garfin was talking about. Does that not get at your question?
Yeah, but those things are things we should be considering. Is that fair to say, or?
Some specific. One of the discussions we were having today was the opportunity to do more stormwater capture and emission and recharge. And you know, we were sort of discussing the places where that's already being done and where it isn't yet, and you know, what we would need to know, where the research would have to go. So it's something that a lot of folks already are thinking about and exploring, and I think it's something you'll be hearing more about over the next few years.
The house now has a metal roof and solar panels, just to let you know. So, that picture was from before. My question is that the two scenarios, they just kind of follow each other comfortably till about 2050. So what's the trigger at that point to make them diverge?
Yes. So basically what's happening is that the amount of gases accumulating in the atmosphere is roughly the same to that point. Thereafter, if we imagine the world that I described to this gentleman, where population is leveling off, global population is leveling off and starting to decline, and where we're adopting more technologies to reduce the emissions of those heat-trapping gases, then we would expect to see a less of a temperature increase, for example. But with the other scenario, if we're continuing to accumulate the gases in the atmosphere, we're trapping more, literally putting a blanket around the Earth of these gases and trapping more in the lower atmosphere.